What up, guys? Welcome to Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, episode 326. Today, we're going to talk about an idea. I think it's really important. It's an idea that a lot of people just gloss over because it's not some instant jiu-jitsu hack, right? But longtime listeners, you know how this is. My thing about these podcasts is the best thing that I can give you is ideas for thinking a little bit differently, approaching things a little bit differently, and coming about things a little bit differently. And so we're going to talk about first the idea. It's like a mindset secret for how to lose like a champion. This is something I've observed and studied in a lot of the best people in jiu-jitsu, and I want to share it with you guys because I think it can be really helpful, because it's something that when you contrast it to the way newer competitors lose and lesser competitors, when you contrast it to how they lose, it is a big difference. And I think that it's a lesson that you can take off the mats as well. So we'll get into that in a second. And then also too, I'm going to respond to a few messages or talk about a few more ideas from the weekend of the CJI and the ADCC, because there's been a lot of different developments that have popped up since then that have given some interesting insights to what was going on with these competitors. And it's just sometimes when you actually realize what these guys are really going through, it's a lot, right? And they get out there and compete. And so again, it's interesting, we'll say it that way, to talk about it. I don't want to say fun, because in some of these situations, nothing about it is fun. But it's worthy of talking about, because again, these are real struggles that people are going through. And I think it's worth talking about. And so we'll get into that in a second. And some of these are questions from the YouTube channel as well. Big thanks to our sponsor, Charlotte's Web. If you guys have never checked them out, charlottesweb.com is the website. They have a ton of different CBD products, and they are the premier CBD company out there, in my bearded opinion. They make an amazing set of products. All of them are third-party tested to ensure the purity and the dosaging of what's in those products. Also, guys, what we'll do for the end of August and into September of 2024, if you guys purchase anything from Charlotte's Web, you use our promo code, which is Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU30. If you purchase anything from Charlotte's Web, send us a receipt either to our Instagram, the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast, on Instagram, or there is our email that we have, which is, what is that?
Yeah, so Instagram is going to be Jiu-Jitsu Podcast,
Okay,
and
Podcast.
They can send the other one to the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast at gmail.com or Chewjitsu Podcast at gmail.com.
So send us an email of your receipt, send us a picture of your receipt on Instagram, whichever, and I will send you it's a video bonus. It's a video playlist of 20 plus different videos that I've never posted live on YouTube before. I've given it away a couple times over the years. Some of you guys may have gotten this video bonus years ago, but again, it's a bonus. So if you guys want to get it in the month of September of 2024, or at the end of August 2024, then after you buy something from Charlotte's Web, send a message to us so that we can confirm that you did it, and we'll send you a bonus video again of like 20 different videos. So again, you can get that at charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu30, and that's the deal. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at Epic Roll for being a longtime sponsor of the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. He's been with us for a while, pretty much since we got started. And again, Matt does a lot of good work with newer competitors out there, supporting them to get to their competitions and all that stuff, helping out those up-and-comers. And also, too, he's a big sponsor of the PGF, which is a up-and-coming competition that I think is going to become more and more interesting as time goes on, from talking with our buddy Brandon. And he also makes really cool jiu-jitsu gear and apparel. So if you guys want a t-shirt, you want some hoodies, you want no-gi gear, gis, whatever, go to his website at epicrollbjj.com, look through the catalog that he has, find the stuff that you like, and if you want to save 20% on the order, use the promo code Chewjitsu20, CHEWJITSU20, for 20% off. Also, if you guys would like to join the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast Patreon, you can do so by going to our website at Patreon. Well, it's not our website, but our little section of that website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. When you join up, you'll get access to a bunch of different exclusive sort of bonuses that we give away to the Patreon members. And then on top of that, you'll be supporting the podcast. So some of that stuff could be the library of content that we have with all of our previous guests. We have warm-up routines specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners. We have a few different other things. But again, if you guys want to get more details, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We'll give you more information on how you can support the podcast and also get some cool stuff for it at a very inexpensive price. And that's the website. Also, thanks to me for writing emails to you guys daily. So, so if you guys would like to join my daily email list, I send out a daily email that goes through everything from the stuff that we talk about here on the podcast. A lot of the stuff is here I go into it in the email. Everything from philosophical ideas, books that I'm reading, diet and training tips, jiu-jitsu ideas, behind the scenes stuff, anything and everything. I talk about it in my email. And again, you can get that daily by going to my website at shujitsu.net/join. Now, listen, let me tell you something. When you join that, I'm going to send you a daily email that's Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekends, but every day. And in that email, I will sometimes say, hey, I have something to buy. I have an event to come to. I have products that I'm offering. Would you like to buy a t-shirt? I will have that stuff almost like, towards the end of the email. I always try to give you a good idea. I had an email from a guy who sent me a message the other day, and he was like, I keep getting these spam emails from you. And I was like, what? I was like, spam emails? I was like, could you send me one? And first off, like he was no longer on my list. I had, deleted him or whatever. And I was like, could you send me one of these emails that you got? And he's like, yeah. And it was like from June. And he was sending me a message like, I can't stop getting these spam emails. I'm like, bro, you haven't gotten an email from me since June. Like, why? What is wrong? Anyway, so he sends me the message, and it's one of my daily emails. Mm-hmm. And in this particular one, I was giving away, I think, a really good tip for dealing with side control escapes. And so, basically, he's like, I was like, I don't know if you know this, man, but you sign up for a daily email. It's plastered everywhere on all the stuff that I do. I send it to you daily, and you can unsubscribe, which you've already done. So I just put them on a blocked list. So if he ever tries to resubscribe, mm-hmm. It's just going to say, no, you cannot, because I don't want to deal with them. It's like, it's interesting to see this where, it's a daily email. Why am I getting so many emails? It's like, it's not spam. I didn't sell your information to someone. I'm not sending you, emails for like pills that are going to, enlarge something. I'm just saying, hey, here's some ideas for jiu-jitsu every single day. Just a little short email that you can read about 2 to 5 minutes and then be on your way. But it's always, it's so interesting how upset people get about something that they did. Like you signed up for it. Yeah. So anyway, if you join, I'm going to send you a daily email. So if you don't want a daily email from me, then don't sign up.
As advertised,
right? Don't sign up. So anyway, with that said, guys, let's jump into this podcast and let's talk about how to lose like a champion and a secret mindset to do so. So check this out, guys. In the book, The Birth and Death of Meaning by Ernest Becker, he talks about this idea about how our ego isn't just our body, but our possessions, reputations. It all becomes an extension of how we view ourselves, right? If you really think about that, like when you say, who am I? You will start to tell me all sorts of stuff about yourself that really isn't you. I mean, it's things you've done, it's things you've accomplished, mm-hmm. but are they you, right? And sometimes it's kind of a weird thing to think about, but a lot of the stuff that we sort of equate as us is not us, right? So anyway, here's what he says in the book. And I'll quote him. He says, we call precisely these people strong who can withdraw at will from trifling parts of their identity, or especially from important ones. Someone who can say, quote, it is only a scratch on a Ferrari, end quote. The uneven wall is not me. The wood crack is not me, and so on. They disentangle themselves easily and flexibly from the little damages and ravages to their self-extensions. This flexibility of the self is real power, and the achievement of it is a rare maturity. In technical language, we say that the person is well-centered and has control of his ego boundaries. The extensions of his self do not pull him off balance. Rather, he controls them. This centering of the ego boundaries under one's control is one of life's principal tasks, and few achieve it. So think about this, right? When you really think about this, right? Like this is important, and this is why I'm sharing it. This weekend, watching some of the guys backstage, right? I'm watching some of the best fighters, best grapplers around, and I'm watching them go out, and I'm watching them come back in. Some of them winners, some of them losers. And you will see this big contrast with how the best in the world lose versus, just the way many people lose, right? The best in the world, when they come out and they lose, I mean, they're bummed. They're like, damn, all that work, you're definitely bummed. There it goes without saying. But when you watch them, they're in higher spirits than what you expect. Like in some cases, the guys who went back and battled each other, when they're coming back, they're like arm in arm, like buddies. I watched two guys where they just had a battle. They coming back, their arms over top of each other's shoulder, talking. You would have, if you didn't know any better, you would have thought these guys were just best friends. Like they were just like hanging out and whatever. And I saw that so many times when you see guys where they're, even Victor Hugo, he talked about, he lost his match against Lucas Kennard. He was like, man, I guess I should feel worse about it, but I don't. I'm just, he made a post about how he didn't really all feel all that bad, right? When you look at like Rafael Lovato Jr., right? Think about how many times that guy lost, because he's always been trying to get up to that ADCC podium, right? And he struggled with it. And like he's been doing this for years. I think his first time, I could be wrong, it was either 2007 or 2009, but either way, he's been trying for over 15 years to get.
Is this the best? I think this is
his best
ever
performance, performance bar none, right? Do you think he could do that if he over-identified with his loss, right? No. And this is the idea that when you watch many of the best people, they have this mental strength and this maturity with their competition performances to disentangle their self from their wins and their losses. This is something my student Brandon, he has a mantra that he repeats to himself over and over again when he gets ready to compete. And basically he says to himself, you're more than this. Now, this is a reminder that he's more than his losses, but also that he's more than his wins. Because a lot of times when we win something, we get attached to that, right? Ooh, I won something. I'm a champion, right? But remember, you're more than this. And this is only for a fleeting moment of time, right? Like you being a champion doesn't last forever. It's like that, and then you go back to, you're the champion last year, not this year. So again, you have accomplished those things. And so the idea that I'm getting at here is one of the things that holds most people back from, I think, becoming the best version of themselves in competition, in the gym, in their lives off the mat. To me, is usually their mindset and how fragile it really is, right? How many people get so worked up over a competition that they don't compete, or when they get out there, they freeze up, during the match because they're so nervous about losing. How many people struggle to do new stuff with their jiu-jitsu in the gym because they don't want to, quote, lose in practice?
Yep.
When you get off the mats, like how many people don't want to do something because they're afraid of it. They're afraid, what happens if I fail? What if it doesn't go well? Right. And again, all of this is a symptom of not being centered and being mentally fragile. And so in my bearded opinion, one of the things that I've noticed with the best people that we've talked to in this podcast, with the people that I've met in person, just talking backstage, and even the people that I study, because when I watch the best people, I'm studying them, not just from the standpoint of like, what are they doing technically? Everything becomes a study, right? You're like watching, how did they get off the mat? How did they deal with that? What's their warm-up routine like? What are they? I study people very much. And again, in a way that's not just what kind of armbar did he use? Like, no. We got to go back to other stuff. What kind of training habits does he have? What kind of other things does he have? All these things, which one is one of the beautiful parts about the podcast is I get to do that and break that up. And that's like a lot of times where the questions come from. I'm like trying to get to, who are these guys? Not just your techniques, but who are you? Because I think a lot of that stuff's far more important. But when you study these people, again, you start to see this. And one of the things that I've experienced in my own experience that matches up with all these is that when I stopped sweating over losing and the outcome is precisely when I reached an entirely new level in competition, in my abilities in the gym, in all these different things and just in every facet. And so again, I think it's one of those things that's super important. It's talked about very little, which is, I think it's why it's important, but it's something that you see, it's a trait that you see pop up over and over again, right? Like when you're watching the best guys, they don't go up and like punch a wall because they got upset because they lost. I'm not saying it doesn't ever happen, but it typically doesn't happen. They get up, they're like, well, shit. All right, let's get back to it. That's about it. That's the end of it. It's not this big drawn out thing. And so I think that's something to keep in mind for you guys, because many newer competitors, and it's not even just newer competitors. I mean, this is something that can take years to grapple with, pun intended. It can take years to grapple with, where you get your head wrapped around that, like, You're not your losses. You're not your wins. That's something you did. Go out and do it. And there's definitely something to say about achievement and accomplishing things. That's all very, very good. But understand that those aren't you. And a lot of people get wrapped up in it, like, because people get like wrapped up. Oh, look at my car. Look how cool it is. And you think you're better because you have a car.
Yeah.
What happens if you all of a sudden, you lose some money and all of a sudden that car gets repossessed? Are you somehow the car? You're still here, right? And you might win a championship this year. You might go out next year and lose. Does that mean that, who are you? Like, again, all these things are going on. So you want to create a separation. It's fun to go after achievement. It's fun to go after things, but you want to have that disentanglement from your ego, from yourself, by being wrapped up in those things. And it makes for a beautiful mindset where you can go after things. You can basically go 100% into achievement, or go for achievement, because you're not hindered by the worry of, well, what happens if, because it's not there. Because you're like, well, if it happens, well, whatever, I'll deal with it. I'm just trying to set my sights on this thing. And you're not worried about the outcome so much, because you know that whether you win or lose, you are still here. And it's something to chew on, and something that I've noticed. And so I wanted to share it with you guys.
So I think, when you say those things, I see it as freedom. Like, you're free when you're on the competition mats. Essentially, you're just like, I'm free. I'm free to express myself how I want. Nothing's holding me back. So the question that I have, and you were back there, Chewy was back there coaching Brandon. So he got to you're back there for quite a while, probably like half of the morning, a bunch of the matches. You got to really sit back and see, up front what the competition was like, and then also in the back how these guys are getting ready and these women are getting ready, what they're maybe like, how they're moving around, what they're doing. How do you think these elite level grapplers disentangle themselves from the moment, from the wins and losses? What is something maybe that you saw? Like you said, Brandon does a mantra. Some people have a specific routine that maybe puts them in the right mindset, whatever that is. Like, what do you think? I mean, maybe you didn't see anything, but what would you estimate or guess could be the reason?
I think my estimation would be that many of these competitors are veterans. They've done stuff a lot. They've competed for a long time, right? And eventually you have to be introspective enough with a lot of things to think about it. As a competitor, what are you doing? It's a big part of it is introspection. I'm not saying that like competitors aren't like crappy people. I'm not saying that, right? But there is, if you're trying to get the best, there is a level of introspection involved with, and analyzing your weaknesses and strengths, mentally, physically, all of it, right? So you're trying to dissect yourself. And so at some point, most people come to the realization that like me being all clingy about winning isn't making anything better. And a lot of times I feel like many people have come to this realization where maybe they get called up last minute. They're in good shape, whatever they're training, but then they get called up last minute for a match and they have no real investment in it. It's just like, oh, whatever, let's go. And then they go out there and they have their best performances in some cases. I've said this myself. I listened to a Craig Jones podcast with Lex Friedman recently, and he said it. I've heard this so many times. And so you realize, oh, so me getting all like wound up tight about it really isn't helping anything, right?
Yeah.
Like one of the first times I experienced this freedom was when I was a white belt and I competed in a tournament against a purple belt. I knew the guy was a purple belt. He'd been training for 6 years. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 6 months, aside from 3 years of wrestling. So I just knew I was going to get messed up. He was going to just whoop me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to lose. So I'm just going to go have fun. I ended up winning the damn match. I was like, whoa. And he'd taken second at Pans as a blue belt the previous year. He was pretty good. It wasn't like he was a slouch. He was good. And so I was like, man, that was really good. And then the next match, I was like, okay, maybe I can win this. And then I got smoked. Now again, it may have not changed anything, but I just knew that my mindset changed, and so did everything that I was doing on the mats. And so I've noticed this over and over again when I don't care, when I really want to win, but I don't care about how it goes. I have this beautiful freedom that's technical aggression, that's going for the win, but that's not hindered by a what if. And so I think that what, happens is, everybody has their own way of centering themselves and basically getting mentally prepared. But I think that what happens is if you've been competing for a while and you've won some stuff, you realize like none of it really matters. I mean, it does matter. Don't get me wrong. It does matter on some level, like your ability to, go get seminars or, all that stuff matters, right? Especially if you're a full-time competitor, it does matter. But there's a side of it that doesn't, because like, let's say if you lose the match, whatever, I'll compete again. Let's say if you win the match, great. you throw the medal in your gym bag, and maybe you have a little seminar circuit, and then in a few months nobody gives a shit. It's that fast, right? It's like, so you're still here though. So really, like, what changes? And so you have to be honest with yourself, because no medal is going to fulfill, if you have a void in yourself, no medal is going to fill that. You can rack up medal after medal after medal, and it's not going to fill some sort of emptiness. You might be excited, it might give you goals, and it's fun and everything else, but you're still always going to want more. And so you realize that after a while, right? Like, like, you might have these goals of fulfillment that you want to achieve, but winning the medal, losing the thing, it's not going to change that much in the grand scheme of things. And when you realize that, then all of a sudden you get this, it unlocks this level in you, because like you said, you're free. You can be your best self because you're not hindered by the what ifs. And a lot of times for people, you'll find that when you have this freedom of mind is when you go to competitions and you're better in competitions.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people go to competitions and they're worse. It's probably a mindset issue. But what happens is, when you don't care, is when you go to competitions and you're actually better in the competition than you are in the gym. That's when you get something special.
Yeah. Well, I think that it just doesn't change who you are. They know they're the same person, and they've done it so many times that they've won. They're the same person. They've lost. They're the same person.
Yeah,
it doesn't
nothing really changes.
Yeah, it's like they all go back and like, well, my family's still going to love me, and I'm still going to be the same person. My students are still going to be there. So that's the thing. And I think a lot of that comes with reps too. Like you were mentioning it, and I was like, yeah, these people have been through so many highs and so many lows. And even Gordon's on a huge winning streak. But we'll talk a little bit about, there's so much that we don't see on the outside, just sitting in the stands and seeing this guy come out and again be dominant and win. But there's so much that goes behind the scenes. But he's still Gordon. He's still, like, these guys are still, Felipe still he is, and Brandon, who did great his first ADCC, is still who he is, and he's still a badass competitor and young up and comer, and he's going to have big things to happen. So they don't connect that. And Brandon says that thing, I'm more than this.
Yeah. And again, he means it not just for his losses, but his wins.
100%.
He's won 3 national championships in college, right? So that's, you could really hang on to that, and get wrapped up like, I'm a national champion, whatever, but again, he's like, I'm more than this. We're just here to do this, right? Know? And so, like, when he was done, he was in good spirits. He was hot. He was happy, man. He's like, fought out of some stuff. He went out there and did the damn thing. Like, he was all right.
He went and did what he intended to do. Obviously, he wanted to win, but he intended to be aggressive and show himself and be exciting. And he was.
And he didn't want to. So, he did not want to just play the game. He wanted to get in there and fight. He didn't want to just like, all right, let me try to squeak by on someone. He wanted to fight. Yep. Which I admire, because I think that's what everybody should be after. So I'm proud of.
Well, that's just going to make you go back out. Like, nobody wants to see a boring ass match. You know what I mean? Like, there were some we remember. What do we remember from the past weekend? Cade and Tackett, right?
Tackett, Giancarlo versus J-Rod.
Giancarlo's J-Rod. We saw even I thought Kanan looked awesome. He wasn't so flashy, but man, his pressure passing, if you know what you're looking at, like, you can see he's cooking people, and he's like, it's just a matter of time. And you can see kind of the potential kind of starting to build, and then he's gonna get his W and get his pass.
Yeah, a lot of people, will criticize. I've seen people criticize Kanan before, but like, they don't know what they're watching. Because if you know what you're watching, it's like, oh, this is what he's doing.
If you had it done to you before, you understand it too.
Yeah. Well, it's like when you watch boxing, like the lay person who doesn't know boxing, the only thing they want to see is a knockout. But if you give a boxer or someone who studies boxing, you put them they watch a boxing match, there's a lot of technical things going on that they're watching that the regular person doesn't see. And it's not exciting to the regular person, but to the person who studied boxing, it's very interesting to them.
Yeah. And we briefly talked about on the previous podcast about Gordon. Now some stuff comes out like, hey, he was not really training very much. He was still, beating really probably the number 2 guy in the world. Maybe, you got to think Nicky Rod's up there too.
I think Nicky Rod I think Felipe's probably number 3.
We'll say top 5.
Yeah.
Just
100% top 5.
Because Kanan's up there too. And we don't know. So top 5, beating that guy.
Well, I'm thinking of it at the heavyweight weight class.
Yeah.
At the 99 weight class, he's like top 3, because it's like Gordon, Nicky Rod. Because if you go back to 2022, it was Gordon, Nicky Rod, and then him.
So what we're finding out now essentially is that Gordon really didn't start training for ADCC until about 10 days out. He was kind of like an I don't know if I'm going to be out there. So going out there and having, you know, a 20-minute match and then another 20-minute match, I mean, that's tough, especially at that level. And that I'm sure he feels some pressure too, you know, not having reps in. So like, I mean, I think that puts his whole perspective, like his whole performance in a different perspective for me, that he's not firing at all cylinders and he's still able to beat, you know, some really high level competition.
Well, everybody was, you know, after the thing was over, people were commenting, "Oh, Gordon's done with. He's over." You know, everybody's ready because, you know, Gordon, the persona that he's put out, he's kind of a heel. You know what I mean? He's kind of, you know, granted, if you watch his, he's always very respectful after the matches, but to build things up, he's very much the heel, and he trash talks. Well, whenever, you know, that happens, you build a following, but you also build a lot of people that hate you, you know, which is by design. But he ends up, you know, he gets in there and everybody's like, "Oh, he's done with. Nicky Rod's going to get him." Da, 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 da. And so when you see him, you're like, "Oh, that guy that you saw out there was able to hang with the best, and he hasn't really been training, you know." And again, he could be lying, but I take him for his word because I know people inside the New Wave camp, and I've talked to them. And several months ago, when, you know, I was at the trials, they were talking about it like, "Man, Gordon's not in good shape right now. Like, he's not feeling too good and he's not able to train." Da, 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 da. So I believe him when he says it because of the things that I heard from people inside that training camp. And so I was like, you know, I mean, again, that's pretty impressive. You're talking about like one of the best guys in the world who goes out there on like 50% and he's out there still winning. That's pretty impressive. And another thing too was one of his opponents, Yuri Samo. You know, he posted about this where Yuri was, you know, had a shoulder surgery and that they were going back and forth. And, you know, Gordon was giving him resources to help him out with his, shoulder and his recovery.
Like trying to like they both said, or Gordon said, we didn't know if either one of us was going to make it to that match. We were both kind of in rough shape and Gordon was trying to help him get healthy. And, you know, I think that's like a side of him that not a lot of people see. And I thought it was a pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think it's by design, right? Like it's always so funny. I think it was me and BMAC or something. We were talking about Gordon. Like if you meet Gordon in person, I'm sure he has some negative interactions with people, right? With anybody, right? I mean, there's people that have had negative interactions with me. And I consider myself a fairly nice guy. Well, I've never seen anybody in person have like a negative interaction. Gordon's very nice in person to people. He's very, very generous with his time, everything else. He seems like a very nice human being to people in person, but his online persona, you know, I was like, whoo, like that's different. I mean, he's poking the bear all the time on people. But again, it's just interesting to see it. So there's always this side of him that sometimes peeks through. And you're like, you know, it makes you wonder, like, you know, who are we really dealing with? Is this social media thing? Is this all just for, you know, basically stirring the pot so he can keep attention? Or is that just a side of him that, like, basically, you know, every one of us is multifaceted.
Sure.
There's sides of ourselves, right? And so, you know, with the internet, you get to show sides of yourself, you know, and maybe you just want to delve into this side because you realize, well, when I post this kind of stuff, people, you know, really like get all crazy and gets engagement going and it seems to help me sell tickets, whatever. So I will post this side of myself and turn it up to 11 for a little bit, right? That kind of thing. Cause I always wonder about that, you know, who's who, because you don't really know if you're through social media.
Yeah. They show you what the side they want you to see.
Right.
And I think that he's found that him being this heel in some ways, being kind of this kind of abrasive personality to some people, it brings on more attention.
Sure.
That's why he's got more followers. That's why people that love him and hate him tune in to watch. And ADCC didn't have as good of a turnout, but people were still paying attention to what he was doing.
Sure. Well, I mean, and that's something you look back at, there's guys like Muhammad Ali, who is widely regarded as, you know, a very important figure, right? For a lot of different reasons. Well, when you go back and actually see him in his day, he purposely stirred the pot. You know, I mean, he's during his day, he was shit talking, right? It's different, but he had that very, you know, poetic shit talking that he's talking trash on people. You know, and again, a lot of people wanted to watch Muhammad Ali to lose. He wasn't universally liked. And because it was by design, like he's going out there, you know, basically talking trash about the people he's fighting and, you know, saying this and that, you know, that's why they called him the Louisville Lip. You know, like again, he had all these different nicknames that to go, you know, confer that he was a big mouth who talked trash.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we forget about that, right? Like where some of these old, you know, people who have now changed as they've gotten older and their personas have changed during their heyday, you know, they made people to where there was no indifference. You either loved them or you hated them.
Yeah.
And so obviously I think that's what Gordon's doing.
Well, then they pay attention.
Yeah.
If they hate you or they love you, they pay attention.
That's it. You're either going to be there to watch them lose, or you're going to be there to watch them win.
Yep. But it was good. You know, again, on the other side of it, look at Felipe. Brandon slammed him at a highlight, like kind of slam, getting out of a choke. And I guess Felipe injured his back on that. And then after he had won his division, he was talking about having a lot of personal issues. So like, you never know where these guys, where their headspace is, where they're at. Like, are they focused on what they're doing? Yeah. What else are they struggling with? They got their own demons and their own stuff, just like we do. And but being out there and still being able to perform that high level, like it's pretty impressive. And then we got also a list of other people that you, after it all is said and done, you get all these ideas and you see all these things about injuries and stuff they've been dealing with.
Yeah, well, and I think it's just something worth bringing up. Just like we're talking about losing. Well, you know, a lot of people, they, you know, get ready for a competition, they stump their toe and they're, oh, I got to back out. You're like, well, maybe you do, but also understand that nobody, if you're training really hard, nobody goes into their competitions 100%. There's always some stuff going on. The Hulk, he had a dislocated shoulder, and then which required him to go to the hospital. Big Dan, he had rhabdo, leading up to the ADCC that he was dealing with by overexertion. You know, Gordon, I think, even Brandon. I mean, Brandon was dealing with a couple little injuries, you know what I mean? So guys are always dealing with this stuff. And so when you see those guys out there, understand that, you know, they don't show it a lot, but a lot of times they're, you know, when you're behind, I always talked about this, like when you're in the backstage and you're under the hum and the light of just the fluorescent lights that are over top of you, there's this feeling, especially when it's over, of just your body, like it's like final. It's, you know, like how they talk about when someone is injured or trapped or whatever, how they don't feel pain as much because their body's blocking it. And then as soon as they see help coming, it's like the pain comes back to them and they'll literally pass out because it's so excruciating. It's kind of like that, where, you know, you while you're getting ready for the competition, your body just does something to help deal with it, whatever it does, right? You go out there, you compete, and it's like you forget about it. You're like, I'm all right, I can deal with this. And then as soon as you go back and you're, you know, under the lights of the backstage room, the whatever warm-up area, and you're just there, then it's like all of a sudden it all comes up. Like, damn, like my body's messed up. You know what I mean? I mean, Brandon, like, I mean, his back was super, he pulled something in his back when he lifted Felipe off the ground. Gordon injured his knee, you know, during
Gordon had a knee injury.
So there's so much stuff going on, you know, and you're always going to see this when you're dealing with this stuff. And again, I share this because I know that a lot of people that listen to the podcast, we have a wide range of audience, but we do have a lot of newer people, and understand that when you're competing, you're going to deal with a lot of this stuff, and it's just part of it.
Yeah, when you're at the highest level, when it's like $10,001 is on the line for Hulk. You know, here's a little bit. He had a dislocation like 5 weeks out, and he had to go to the hospital, and they had to relocate in the hospital, which is a smart thing. If this happens to you, if you have a dislocation, do not try unless you have a medical professional that knows how to do this. Do not do it right there. Like, stabilize and maybe like support the arm and get to the hospital and let them take care of it, because you can do more damage. But with a dislocation, you can have rotator cuff damage, you can have labral damage. I mean, you could literally lose a lot of your strength and function in that shoulder, and it could be more likely even to dislocate again. You could have nerve damage. I mean, that's a big thing. You get like a traction injury. So the fact that he was able to come back and use that arm in a way, it's going to limit him too, because you have to be really careful letting that arm.
Oh yeah.
Marigali had an injury as well. Obviously, you saw, like, hey, he was in pretty bad shape after he went against Pixley. There's no way that guy's going to be training week, 2 weeks.
Right.
I mean, 5 weeks maybe, but that's really not safe to do.
It's still going to be very light.
You need, unless it's a very important match, it's something you can't, you know, maybe a life-changing thing, which, you know, I think the CJI was probably for a lot of
try to win $1 million.
To win $1 million,
but grapplers.
Yeah, but most likely you're not going to be. You're going to be off the mats for quite a while doing the proper rehab, hopefully not needing any kind of surgery, but that just depends on. And here's the other thing. The number one predictor of injury is previous injury. So if you've dislocated, you're more susceptible to dislocate again. So you have to really take that seriously.
Yeah. So it's important.
Yeah.
You know, during the, I posted a video up about the the whole, the event and stuff. And again, I was talking pretty much off the cuff and just kind of talking about different things that I thought were important. And also my reactions to the actual events.
Yeah.
I wasn't talking about the inner workings of stuff because, it's like a lot of people were saying like, how Chewy, why aren't you talking about athlete pay or whatever? I'm like, well, like that wasn't the event itself. I mean, that was great that they had it, but I was focusing mostly on just watching the event and how the events went off. And just the interactions there. But obviously, for people that are listening, because I got a bunch of comments about that. Of course, the athlete pay was great.
It's amazing.
I think it goes without saying. It's like, again, it was the highest paid jiu-jitsu competition ever of all time, not even friggin' close. So of course it was great. Again, I hope that it's sustainable. We'll be having we're working on getting some people here on the podcast from the CJI that were involved with the production of it, because I'd like to talk to them. And I know from them, I know they're planning on doing another one. So I hope it continues. Again, it's just one of those things where, I wish I could see like a balance sheet in the back. Like, what does all this look like financially? You know what I mean? Because again, it's one thing to say these things. From a business standpoint, like I wonder what, like from the ADCC, CJI, I wish I could just see what does all the financials look like, in and out, just to have some idea. But of course, the pay was fantastic, and it was great. And someone was like, the energy was electric. Of course, it was. Energy was great at the CJI. And by the way, I didn't get to see the Saturday because I was coaching Brandon, but because I'd mentioned that on Friday there was a lot of empty seats at the CJI, but they said Saturday it like packed up. It was a lot more people, and I'm sure probably because people were like, "Oh man, that looks pretty exciting. I need to get over there." Yeah.
And I think like from an outside perspective, for us being there, I would say CJI was massively successful. I really do. I think it was awesome.
They knocked it out of the park.
Look, if you guys, most people saw the YouTube stream, it was fantastic. I was really blown away how well and smooth everything went.
But it's because they had like a heavyweight production team.
They did the right stuff, man. They put money where they needed to put money because
we talked to BMAC and talking to one of the production guys named Mark. We were talking about it, and it's like, he's like, yeah, man, like they got like legit dudes, like black belts at video production in on this. They didn't just skimp and say, hey, let's find some guys that, can squeeze something together. They got like, legit, people in on that job.
We'll talk to them about the inner workings and what that was like putting it together on such a short time period. But like, I thought, all things considered, there were certain things that didn't, maybe like we talked about the sponsors and stuff, the way the sponsors were set up there was like,
and it was such a small thing.
Yeah.
In that video I was talking about, and the fact that there were very few sponsors and vendors there, and it was just kind of empty.
Yeah.
Which is something that I was talking to one of the producers, and he's like, yeah, we just didn't have the time, which of course I know, like you had 8 weeks for the lead up. So it's really hard to get those sponsors. It's hard for those sponsors to get their product out there. And, again, if you're going to charge thousands of dollars to have a booth there, you want to make sure you can make your money back. So of course you're not going to have a lot. And I said it was a very small thing. And people just didn't understand why I brought it up. Well, I brought it up because it's important. Because when you have a lot of vendors, you have a lot of sponsors bringing their stuff in there. That means they paid a lot of money to be there. And if you are having a guy who says, I want to put as much money back into the fighters as possible, then having those people be there is good, because that means there's going to be more money flowing in for them to go back to the fighters.
Yep. And we don't know what those sponsorships look like.
No, I don't.
And I think it was a little bit more challenging because some of the sponsors that sponsored the ADCC 2 years ago were sponsoring CJI.
That's right.
And it was just kind of, there's a lot different hurdles with ADCC being a T-Mobile arena. There's a lot more hurdles and stuff to get through. So I think it was just a work in progress. And also, sponsors have to kind of figure out what they wanted to do with the CJI 2 months out. Like, well, we're going to take a risk on this. Might be a better financially. It may get us in front of more people with less upfront money.
Who knows?
The main thing, 100% for me and Chewy, I'd probably speak for you as well, as we want this to be successful, and it was successful. I want it to continue to grow. Like, let's not, one event is great. Yeah. Let's do more, and let's have them more frequently. Let's get these fighters paid for sure. Like, I mean, that's what everybody wants, because the more money there is, the more people are going to be involved in the sport, and the bigger it's going to get. If other companies, bigger companies, see money in grappling events,
they'll move in.
And you have bigger sponsors, other sponsors. You may have like type of television deals, whatever. The sky's the limit.
Yeah.
So at no time, like, I think I read some of the comments on one of the podcasts. People are like, you guys are just anti this. Like, no, like at no time. like we want this to be successful, number one, but we also want it to be sustainable. We want it to be like a one and done thing for these grapplers, and then everything else is a letdown after that.
Yeah.
You give people that much money, and then you say, well, I'm going to pay you a quarter of that or a tenth of that. That's going to be a letdown.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is people, again, I've been around for a while, right? And I've seen events come and go, not in MMA and jiu-jitsu. So for instance, I'll give you guys a couple of examples. I remember there was a local organization that I fought for, and these dudes came in. One of them was like a big VP for some tech company, and the other guy was whatever. And these guys were just slanging money, right? I was an amateur fighter, and I ended up making which amateur fighters were technically not supposed to make any money, but they would give us reimbursements. I ended up making like $500. That's $500.
And that was what year?
This is 2006. Bro,
that's like a good amount. That's a chunk,
bro. And you got to think like a lot of amateur fighters or pro fighters barely make a little bit more than that for their pro fights, or like their early pro fights. You make like $600, maybe 6 to show, 6 to win, whatever. Yeah. So again, I mean, money. I was like, oh, that's great. And they were just slinging money. They had all this production and stuff set up, and they were like, we're gonna go battle the UFC. They lasted for a couple of years, went out of business. How many jiu-jitsu organizations have we seen where they come slanging dough around? I mean, the Metamorphosis is a great example. Those dudes are paying, and then he'd stop paying them. Yeah. They're like, oh, we don't have any money, right? Because their investors are drawing and pulling back because they're not making it. So my thing is I have reservations because I've seen this happen so many times where someone comes in and says, I've got this revolutionary idea. We're changing the game. And we've got these investors pulling money into it, and we're just going to throw money around and then not have a plan of, well, how does this make money? Right now, with that, after talking to some of the people around the CJI, they have a plan. I don't know if the plan is going to work or not. I hope it does. But they have a plan of how they're going to make money in the long term. Yep. And they're looking at it from like a tech standpoint where, you look at like tech companies where they will literally eat millions and millions of dollars to eventually make profit, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the tech companies would, ate tons of money until they eventually got everybody using it. And then they'd be like, okay, now we can start selling ads and everything else. Now we'll make our money back. And so they have a plan. And so I hope it works out. And so my thing is there was never I'm never anti anything good for jiu-jitsu. I'm not anti. My thing is, like you said, I'm reserved until I see it, because I need to see what you're doing, because I've just seen so many people come in and say, we're just going to blow it away. We're going to do this, that, whatever. And then it never comes to fruition because you sling around a bunch of money and nothing happens afterwards. And like you said, then all of a sudden it's like, there's a letdown because, well, hey, sorry, we can't pay you that much money anymore because we're not making it. And, whatever. So that said, if Craig's funding sticks around and they're able to build off of this, I think that they have something there. Whether it's going to be profitable to sustain such a high paying event, who knows, but I hope it does. But I think that it's one of these things where they do have a plan now. And I've talked to some people, and, again, I'm not anti anything. It was just, I'm like, I've been conditioned to be reserved. It's like, if you had like a really like absentee father, like I did, it's like, hey kid, we're going to go do this. We're going to whatever. And then like after a while, and he doesn't live up to, he doesn't do any of it. You're like, you say things, I'm just going to like take them with a grain of salt. It's kind of like that. Like I'll believe everything once I see it. Yeah. And that's where I was with it. It's that kind of thing. Also too, I listened to Craig's podcast with Lex. It was the second one that he did recently that like happened right before the event. And that one was probably the most toned down version of Craig, where it was like, I feel like it wasn't just a big joke. It was actually like he's talking a little bit more about it in depth and a little bit more straightforward. And I was like, okay, I get what he's getting at, opposed to the whole time before it was just like, I felt like it was kind of like half comedy hour or something. And I was like, I don't know what I'm listening to. Are you just making jokes about everything or being serious? That one was a little bit more like he was just laying it out as it is. And I was like, okay. Like I'm getting a little bit more with where you're coming from. Because it's in a language that I get, So, but the event went great, and I hope it does well. And I hope that they continue to succeed so that they can, raise things up and improve. And
I think it was definitely viewer friendly. In a lot of aspects. I don't know what the feed looked like, for ADCC and stuff, but like I thought the rule set, all things considered, was pretty great. I
have a question for you.
All right, let's hear it.
So one of the things that's come up over and over again since that event has been the difference between like the Levi Jones Leary match and the Cade Rotolo match. I've heard so many people basically on different ends of this. Some people think that Cade did enough to win. Some people think that Levi should have won. And, I think that, it's worth talking about. Do you think there is a need for the bottom player to be more offensive? Because, the match with Levi and Cade, obviously Levi had definitely had some offense, but a lot of it was Cade pushing in, going for a pass, backing out, trying to pass again. And he was giving good attempts, and Levi was more reactionary. It's like, do we say that, hey, the bottom person has to be aggressive too, opposed to letting the person come in and being completely counter-based? Do we say that there's like an aggression sort of standpoint? What are your thoughts on
I think
that?
there has to be. Like, I think so. We don't look at it as an MMA match. Number one, if you look at it clearly as an MMA fight, most of the time you're going to say the top person is winning because that's a dominant position.
Right.
In a jiu-jitsu match, a guard is a dominant position. Like, you have some kind of guard from bottom that you're on offense. You can score a submission, sweeps, things like that. I do think that I'd have to watch the match again. Who was closer to submissions, who had more submission attempts that were legit submission attempts. I think that if Cade was running, and I don't think he was just being mindful with his entries because Levi is
good,
incredibly good. Look what he did.
He was on
to tie.
Yeah,
he looked great. So I think the right person won.
I think so too.
And
I think that you saw Levi early on. He was kind of getting the better of.
He
Cade.
won the first 2 rounds,
right. and then Cade started to be that Cade was the aggressor. He was pushing forward, and Levi was basically having to respond to him.
Exactly.
And I think the initiation of that, where Cade was initiating, and it was really. I mean, when you have a guy that has amazing guard retention, it is very tough to just blast pass or whatever. And depending on the styles make matches. And so with Cade's kind of wide open style where he's coming through, I think you just had one of those things where his guard retention was just nullifying that passing style. And then you were just getting this thing. But I think at the point, Cade was initiating more and was showing more aggression. So I think towards the end of the round, I think he took over, but it was still a great match.
You also have to look at it's a round by round.
Yeah.
Right. We're not looking at round 1 and that counts any more than round 5.
It's one at a time.
All right. You won that 10-9. I don't think there were any 10-8s. I'm not sure. And I don't even know what constitutes a 10-8. Like, if you got somebody kind of dead to rights in a submission, maybe locked in a rear naked choke and like time runs out, that's maybe a 10-8 because the time was still going. You would have had the finish kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't know, like, who had more dominant positions. And neither one really. It's more about who was attacking, initiating, and I think Cade was going for subs from the top.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to finish. Like, who's trying to finish? And I think after a while, you're also being on bottom. I think that you work harder a little bit in some capacity, like fighting off and just being in that position. I think it can be a little bit harder. I just don't think he was Levi was as aggressive towards the end. Yeah. So I do think the right person won. But again, if we get some more clarification on the rule set, like, what exactly are you guys looking for? Because we had a match similar to that and the other person won, or Levi won a match. Maybe it looked a little similar to that. I don't know, but
yeah, it'll be, I think probably, this is something you expect. I've been around a long time. So when you see organizations with a judging scoring system, you almost know that it's going to come out with that they're going to run into this where, like, your first time, you're going to have kinks, you're going to have things you got to tweak. And a lot of times the scoring is like, well, how are we viewing this? How are we doing this? And unless it's really clearly defined, you're always going to have a little bit of issues with judging, because again, a lot of times as judges, we are, especially if we're being subjective about it, because again, that's one of the reasons. So here's a fun history for you guys. If you go back into, say, wrestling, right? In Olympic wrestling didn't originally have a point system. Originally, it was just until someone got pinned. And then, like, the first Olympics, I think the first match lasted over an hour, or the finals match lasted an hour. Like, they ran out of daylight and they had to start over the next day and finish up. And eventually they put in a system where you would have a referee's decision and these guys would have paddles, and they would simply raise the paddles at the end to say who they thought won. During the Cold War, Russia and the United States are, at each other's throats, and we're like, they don't want to have a scoring system where humans could cheat players out of it. So they came up with an objective scoring system where it was like, you know, if you put the person's back on the mat, or if they do this, a very clear cut system so that, you know, the human subjectivity wouldn't come into it. When you have a subjective view with referees' decisions, which is what we have here, you have a situation where how do you view the match? It's going to be a lot of times, how do you view jiu-jitsu? You know, what kind of positions do you like to play? You know, that's going to be a big decision, because if you're more of a guard player, right, or you play a lot of legs and guard retention, you're probably going to look at Levi, oh man, he was doing a lot. Yeah, well, he was doing a lot. But again, but you have to look at, you know, again, whatever their scoring criteria is, and I think they, you know, they'll need to be a little bit more. They'll have to clean that up. But I wasn't that upset by it, because I think most of the decisions made sense that day, and I think that, like you said, the right person won. It was just a very close battle. I don't think it was like a robbery or anything like that. It was one of those things. Essentially, I think it was very close.
The thing that would be cool, I was just thinking as we're talking, you know how you watch an MMA fight and like round one, they'll say head strikes, leg kicks, takedowns, stats. So we can have stats as in like
guard passing attempts, or
guard passing attempts, sweep attempts, submission attempts, you know, time controlled, maybe like, maybe Levi sweeps him and gets on top and is in a dominant position. So
how long did he have dominant
position time, like mount time, whatever that is, right? So dominant position could be, you know, side control,
back mount. How long were you in one of those positions?
There you go. There's your criteria, so you can see that clearly. But I don't know if obviously the judges probably don't get that information, but we get that information. Like, okay, maybe we'll see what they're looking at. And then those criteria, and I don't know what exact, I know they mentioned what the scoring criteria was, but it was a little bit ambiguous. It wasn't exactly clearly defined, but you can see stats like, hey, maybe like control time. It could be like moving forward. Like maybe the bottom player is moving forward more aggressive, right? So aggressive, who gets the aggression component of it? Who knows? Maybe Cade is really working to pass. He's more aggressive moving forward. Levi's moving back, versus the guy on bottom is scooting, trying to get underneath, be more aggressive in that capacity. Who knows? Those are things to think about. But man, I think they did as good of a job. And that CJI was so enjoyable to watch. It was so easy to see. You could be any dummy off the street, not have any idea on jiu-jitsu, and still kind of have an idea, some capacity what's going on, right? You may not understand, like, well, that guy's on his back, maybe he's losing, not that way, but you can see like, hey, there's one pit, there's two guys going, they're doing this thing. You can see who's attacking, being more aggressive.
It wasn't as complex, like the rulings weren't as complex, because when you get into, say, like let's say for instance, like an IBJJF tournament, I've had tournaments where this one tournament, I got too focused on going for a submission. And so the guy had 2 points on me, and then I almost had his back, I almost had mount. I kept going through these positions. I kept getting close. I had like, it was like 8 advantages or something, you know, just over and over again. I was hunting the submission. And if me and this guy had been in the gym, you would say that, oh, dude, I kicked his butt. I was all over him. But because I didn't put my foot in one place, I didn't get the points. So therefore I lost the match. So, you know, again, with a subjective scoring system, sometimes it's better, because when you're looking at it, it's saying, well, you know, yeah, you didn't get this thing here, but you were all over this guy. And so, like you said, sometimes you can have tournaments or matches where you're watching them in, you would give it to the other guy if it was in the gym, because you're like, well, that guy totally was all over him, but because of the scoring system, that guy won, right? So there's that kind of thing. One message I did want to send out to you guys today is for all the like CJI trolls, or even just the people that are just like, it's interesting, and it's so sad to see, is my you know, because I like my jiu-jitsu communities and stuff like that, but it's interesting to watch where, like, it's like watching the political sphere right now. And I was talking to Brandon McGaffron about it. We were kind of talking about it. Like, why is this? Why is it that, like, if I say anything, like if I say something positive about the ADCC, instantly people are like, well, the CJI, I'm like, well, that's fine. I was talking about the ADCC. I think the CJI was great. But you get this thing where if to say one thing nice about something else means that you're taking away from another. And in this case, again, I view the CJI and the ADCC as kind of different things, right? The CJI is very much entertainment. The ADCC is like the World Championships. They're just kind of different sections. And this is me and Brandon were talking about this. Brandon saw it as like, if you're like looking at basketball, you know, the CJI is like the NBA. ADCC is kind of like the Olympics, right? Again, there's obviously some very, very stark differences there, but you have a situation where, you know, there's a difference there, what they're providing. but again, like at the last podcast, we talked about the kids event that the ADCC did and how it was a really good kids event.
Yeah.
In my mind, it was probably the most like well done, big, like everything kids championships I've ever seen. Kids are walking down. They have the whole experience like they are a world-class competitor, just like, you know what I mean, whatever. A little bit less turned down, but they felt like it too, you know? And so I was saying that like these kids are going to want to go for this. I mean, because again, like you have a nice, I remember back in the day, the IBJJFs had nice medals and compare like everybody has nice medals back then, but back then the IBJJF had these really nice medals and the rest of the tournaments you'd go to, the medals kind of sucked most of the time. So I remember some of us like, man, I just want those nice medals. People will, you know, like there's something to that, right? So, you know, if you have all the lights and stuff like that, why do you think people want to go to the UFC besides the money, right? They're like, they want to be at the big show, right? Yep. Because all the lights, all the people watching, they want to be a part of the big show. And and when I said that, I was saying that, you know, where do you think these kids are going to want to compete if they have this dangling in front of them? And people thought I was saying that they wouldn't compete for the CJI. And that wasn't the point at all, right? I said I meant that they would compete because again, the CGI is not putting on tournaments every week or every weekend or every month. Right now, they've got one big show that's sponsored by a wealthy person, and that's what they do. Now they might change; it might be something that they do later on. We'll see. I don't see that happening anytime soon, but who knows? I could be wrong. Been wrong plenty of times. But as of right now, it's like you have ADCC, you have IBJJF, and then you have like the regional tournaments, like, you know, different ones, and so. If you have this carrot dangling out in front of someone to go to the big show and they have these these local tournaments available to them, these regional tournaments, they're going to go to those. They're going to want to support those. They're going to want to pay into those competitions. And that's a big deal because these kids will grow up with that. And I'm not saying that because of course, if you dangle some serious dough in front of someone, they're going to want to compete for the CGI. And the CGI did a great job of putting on a great event. It wasn't to knock the CGI. Like one person said, did the CGI pay the kids $1 million? I'm like, no, but neither did the CGI.
They didn't pay the women $1 million.
Yeah, I was like, the CGI they didn't pay him $1 million. Like they didn't have any kids on their event. It's a completely different thing, right? If the CGI was putting on $1 million for youth championships, then maybe that's a reasonable conversation. It's just interesting to watch where I feel like I'm watching like, you know, Trump and Kamala Harris discussions in relation to the CGI and the ADCC, where like people are just at each other's throats, and it's so like it's nonsensical to me. You know, again, I've heard people, you know, I think a lot of people get very emotional about the fighter pay, you know, and it's like, hey, like I hear you, you know. Again, with that, it's like I hear you 100%. I just don't know what the financials look like. You know what I mean? Because again, they're both being sponsored by guys just throwing money at it, right? Yep. So I don't know what that looks like. Does the sheik over there is like say this is how much money you're getting, and I don't know. I don't know what any of that looks like. I don't know what their balance sheets look like. And as someone who runs a business, that stuff's kind of important because it sort of judges the decision. I also don't know their game plans. Like for instance, like the ADCC. You know, why did they go to the T-Mobile? I don't know. Yeah. You know, why did they pay that much money to go to the T-Mobile? I have no clue. Maybe they had a plan for it and that would make more money. Who knows? The Craig, at first, like when I was, like looking, I was like, how is he going to make this work business wise? Right. And then after going to, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I get it now. Like when I was watching the stream and stuff like that and talking to some of the production crew and people behind the scenes, you're like, okay, this is his game plan. I get it. Now, obviously he's not going to make his money back on this one, but down the road, maybe it could be there. But I don't know how those things work. So of course, as a fighter, like I'm glad he's paying fighters more. It's fantastic. I think it's a great thing. But I'm also not going to just poop all over another event because, they're not doing exactly what this event is doing. Because again, that's not my thing. But it made me sad to see like where, again, when we talked about kids having a good experience, kids and their parents happy. That was really what was surprising. In the video, really all I was saying is that these kids had a great experience. The parents had a great experience. They're supporting it. And then people just came out of the woodwork ready to trash it. And I don't understand. I'm like, it's just, that's what I was saying. It's like, I wasn't talking bad about the whole episode we did. We talked very high. And to be fair, later on, I was like, hey, did you listen to the podcast? And they're like, sorry, Chew, I did. I was like, yeah, okay. You didn't listen to you listened to one clip and then you took it a certain way.
Right now, this point in time, the CJI does not have a platform for kids to make a name for themselves. The ADCC, by running regional events, giving these kids a constant and consistent platform, that's where all the kids are competing at right now. Number one, they can make a name for themselves. They go in these regional tournaments. They can They have a point. There's a scoring, like a system where they can kind of build their points up and be ranked high. And then it gives them a platform, gives them the environment right now. And those kids can go wherever they want. They're not like, oh, because you compete at the ADCC Opens.
And they do. They compete at all kinds of
go wherever. Once they make a name for themselves, they may be more attractive to the CJI. They're going to go where the money's at. They might go to Polaris. They'll go wherever.
They'll go wherever. Right.
So like, that's the thing. Like, I think the point you're making, or the way that I understood it, was you're giving these kids a professional like platform to make a name for themselves and compete at a pretty amazing venue. Like, it was cool. I did the Open, and it was just cool being on those mats and stuff with like the screen was up.
Now imagine you got to walk down the ramp and stuff.
It's cool shit, dude. It's awesome. Imagine that for these kids. They're like living out. It's like you being I don't know, living out your dream already at like 8, 10 years old. Like, you're walking down like the big stage. You kind of get to do that.
Yeah.
So I just think it's giving them a platform. And if something comes along that's better, and the CJIs come with something really cool, a very unique, interesting, exciting rule set, we're talking about it. I loved being there. I loved supporting it. It was awesome. I just wanted to be successful. And the other thing about CJI, I called it the pit, and it's called the alley.
The alley.
The it's called the alley.
So the pit is a square. They made a rectangle.
Yeah. It's the alley. So I wanted to make sure, and somebody's gonna be like, "It's the alley." And I was calling it the alley.
You know, everybody's been calling it the pit. So like
it looks awesome.
It is like, the alley, but like, you know, but which is, it's a minor adjustment to the pit. But like, you know, it's a lot of
got your own name for it. But like, with that said, like, man, I was so pumped to be there. I was happy that ADCC, like, the matches were fantastic. I don't think it had the same environment. It definitely didn't have the same. The ADCC did not have the same feel, same electricity, same excitement it had 2 years ago. And I think Craig Jones took a lot of that.
Took some thunder.
I think it took a lot of thunder out of there, because people were like, "Oh, I planned on going to this. Now I'm going here." And I think the CJI had that. Now it has momentum. Well, that's exciting.
Well, I think you know, the CJI is like the new kid on the block, right?
So I like it. I'm a fan.
So 2022, the ADCC was, you know, this was a whole new thing. There was never an event in jiu-jitsu that had ever been in a stadium like that. Never, not once, and definitely not filled, right, with anybody.
Right.
And so there was this energy, like, this is a big deal. Like, there, you know, all this excitement. It happened once, right? And so you saw at this event where the Craig Jones was a new thing. It was exciting. It's like, what's going to happen? And then the matches were a lot of fun. I think the only downside probably to the first day of the Craig Jones Invitational was just the length. It was like 9 hours. That's a long time, man. So
they'll figure it out.
Yeah, they'll figure it out. Again, you expect things to not go exactly as planned or whatever on the first run.
Yeah.
But not that big of a deal.
Shout out to Craig Jones, though, for pulling this off. Like, getting
shout out to the dude that's funding the damn thing.
Well,
because like, whoever's funding the damn, like, that's a you know, I mean, probably got a ton of money, right? So it's shout out to that guy for saying, let's support Craig Jones's idea, and let's pay these dudes $1 million.
This dude that's out there like in Thailand doing crazy stuff, and like putting your trust in that guy, and you're a little bit like, but I think the same thing we talked about. Gordon has a certain appearance on social media. Craig's
an intelligent guy,
100%.
So like, listening to him on like the Lex Friedman podcast recently, you're like, you start to hear him talk about certain things. You're like, this guy's an intelligent dude. Like, he's not dumb. He's not dumb.
Persona is there, and that's what people love. And like the crazy shirts, like the merch. Let me tell you this, guys.
Someone called him on the YouTube. They called him the Deadpool of BJJ.
Oh my god, he's like perfect.
Yeah, you know,
the merch. So there was like a merch tent or merch area at CJI, and there was a merch tent at ADCC. CJI, when we were there, the merch tent was like, I don't even know, like 100 people deep.
Yeah.
The whole time. Like, people were going nuts for all the merch. Everybody wanted, and then people were wearing like CJI stuff at the ADCC.
Yeah.
And Craig Jones, I think, put a post. He said, if you wear your CJI stuff at ADCC and take a picture, I'll enter you into a drawing for $5,000 or something. Funny. I was like, dude, you're just like a master troll. Yeah. But
great marketer.
Craig Jones killed it. Like, I think they knocked it out of the park. It was awesome. I think ADCC was great. It was overshadowed a little bit by all the excitement for this kind of new kid on the block. But man, like, now if we can get a little bit here and a little bit there, give each one their due, and like have the best athletes of both. Like, one has one weekend, the other one has the other weekend. I mean, that'd be awesome.
Yeah,
it completely would be awesome. And I think wouldn't force us to split our time and get more of the community behind each event. You know, have to kind of like choose, which people could kind of figure it out. They could make both work if they had to, but it was still a little bit of a struggle.
The fighter standpoint, like, I would like to see, you know, I mean, it made interesting because a lot of the fighters were split. Because, like, let's say, for instance, let's say that they were giving away all that money, and you might see the same person win both.
Yeah, I'd come over here and give me 10K for this one.
Yeah,
and they'll come over here and win 100K or whatever it is,
a million or whatever,
whatever you got. Like,
so with all the fact that the CJI and the ADCC were splitting people, you had a lot of different new blood that got a chance to get in there, and even if they didn't win, they had a chance to surprise people with some of their wins. And I think that that was a unintended benefit of the fact that they were ran on the same weekend. Because again, you had to choose. And so you got some of the best guys split, like a lot of the heavier guys, I felt like stayed with ADCC, and a lot of those smaller guys, they jumped over and they went out there to go get the win. And I think it made for some fun. I mean, you had guys like Levi Jones-Leary. Haven't really seen a lot from recent. May look great, looked amazing,
absolute stud. Train with Lachlan. I mean, Lachlan's like a little wizard, dude.
He's great.
He's incredible.
And so it was very interesting to see. And so, like you said, though, I hope that, and this is, me and BMAC were talking, I hope this thing eventually settles down, and that we have these multiple organizations that instead of saying, hey, we have one big organization, that's all that matters. We have multiple organizations that are really important in jiu-jitsu, and we hope that they continue to grow well. And I hope that they continue to, grow and can support the fighters for a long term. And, my hope is that someday they don't need to be basically subsidized by rich people.
Yep.
My hope would be that, like, man, I hope that, like, they could be, they could attract sponsors. They could attract big companies to be sponsors for them. They could get enough in, sales of tickets or whatever, get all the stuff, all the different avenues for money to be made. I hope that that's what happens. So this way you can actually have something that is going to be around, because it can sustain itself. Because otherwise we're always at the whim. Well, how long does this sheik want to support this? How long does this unnamed rich guy want to support this? That's where we're at right now. Whereas, like, basically if the investor goes, the whole damn thing falls apart. And then the people that really lose on that is the fighters, because then, like, oh, we had this event that we could compete for money and get notoriety, and people would see, now it's gone.
Yeah.
Or, so if we can eventually get to that point, that's what I want to see. And that's where I'm most excited to see at some point. And I think, again, I hope that both organizations are able to achieve that. They might have different routes, but I hope that they're able to achieve it one way or the other, so that they can support themselves and they can also continue to pay fighters. I mean, it's just like the UFC. You look at the UFC has, since the beginning, has been criticized over and over and over again for their pay for fighters. You know what I mean? And, like, sometimes maybe it was true, whatever. But at the same time, you got to think, like, the UFC took a company, the Zuffa bought a company that was dying, and they had to bring it back to life, and they had to be very careful.
Strategic with it too.
I forgot the number. They bought it for, like, next to nothing.
$2
million, excuse me, 2 million,
4 million.
It was something. It was for a big like IP. It was very low, and then now it's worth, like, so much money,
billions.
Yeah, and you're like, they had to make smart business decisions, and sometimes those smart business decisions aren't always so popular.
Correct.
You know what I mean? And it's just the nature of the beast, right? Because some of those young fighters that helped support them, they were worth more than what they got paid. But sometimes they just didn't have it. They didn't make it. You know what I mean? And so it sucks, and we can always get mad and poo-poo all over, like, business owners and stuff. And we're not in that seat.
Yeah.
And I know that makes people really angry when you say that, because, again, obviously everybody wants the fighters to get paid more money. I'm right there with you. No brainer. But, like, when you look at it sometimes, like, again, sometimes unless it's there, what do you want them to do? If the money's not there, if the people aren't showing up, if the stuff isn't selling, you can't just ram the thing into the ground because of an emotional decision, if you're trying to run this thing. Now, again, with the whole inner workings between the ADCC and stuff like that, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast, and thank you for being with us for another. All my CJI trolls, here's to you. I'll drink a little sip, because I'm sure you'll send me some messages later and let me know why the ADCC is the worst thing to man that's ever been. I just think it's funny, man. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight. I think it's more funny when people get, like, overly emotional about things that they have. Again, it is what it is. If you feel really strongly about it, to you, but it's interesting how quickly that can be generated on a snap. You know, like it's like I said, BMAC, we're talking about it, like people didn't know about anything and there wasn't a problem, and then all of a sudden overnight there was.
Make a problem, create it, separate people.
Right. And it's like, was the problem always there? And that, you know, basically just nobody knew about it, you know, and that could be a thing. So who knows, like I said, but nonetheless, you know, again, I'm rooting for both organizations. And I think that they're just like BMAC was talking about, they're going to represent different facets of jiu-jitsu. They'll bring a different sort of side to jiu-jitsu. They'll be different. And I hope they continue to kill it. And hats off to Craig Jones for running a great event. And hats off to all the ADCC competitors this weekend or past weekend, who just really went for it and made for, I think, one of the best. It may have not as been electric in the crowd as 2022, but I think the actual matches themselves were better in 2022 than they were, or 2024 than they were in 2022.
Yeah. And I think ADCC ran really smooth, really well.
Yeah.
Did a great job. It's like almost like we don't even mention it because we expect
it. There's an expectation.
So high level.
Yeah.
They did a great job. And I thought like the commentary was really good. Sean Williams is one of my favorites. I've said that before. And then we talked about the guy that did the post-fight interviews and stuff was awesome.
Yeah, Jake Watson. Yeah,
Jake Watson's really good. I think they did a great job. They gave people some time after the matches to, you know, kind of speak their mind and share some stuff. And it was great to hear that. And it was ADCC ran really well, and it was smooth and it was enjoyable. Yep. Hats off to like how they ran it, and Gordon again still undefeated. We'll see if that changes. We got a couple of rivalries renewed and brewing.
Yeah, because the Kanan match, if him and Kanan go against each other, this will be the first time they've seen against each other since 2018. They went against each other in no-gi pants, so we'll see what happens.
It'll be fun to see that. Totally different fighters. And then, you know, then you got
Nicky Rod.
Nicky Rod's kind of like, hey, I've got $1 million, you got $1 million, let's put them up and then see who wins. And it'd be fun if Gordon truly was not healthy, which I have no reason to believe that he would be making that up. If he's healthy and he's ready to go, and Nicky Rod's healthy and ready to go, like, let's see.
What does that match look like?
It's been, look, Gordon was up here, Nicky Rod's down here, and then every time it's closer and closer, and Nicky Rod's closing the gap on him.
Yeah.
So
we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. I'm excied for it. Again, the big takeaway for me this weekend was that I loved all of it, and I hope it continues to go, because it's makes for some fun jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
That said, guys, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors, Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, for any of you guys that are interested, if you go to charlottesweb.com and you use the promo code Chewjitsu30 to buy something on their website, whatever you buy, just shoot us an email at jujitsupodcast@gmail.com.
Yep.
or
Instagram.
Just send us a copy of your receipt to basically prove you just bought something using the code. And what we'll do is we will send you a video link or a link to a video playlist that has a bunch of stuff that I've never released on YouTube, just some different videos. And for many of you guys, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you may have already gotten this bonus before, but periodically I'll give this out, and essentially it has a 20 plus videos that for whatever reason never made it to the YouTube website or on YouTube, like live in public, and you can get access to those for getting it as a extra bonus. So if you buy tincture, gummies, whatever, just send us the receipt afterwards. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at Epic Roll. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. If you're looking for new gear, t-shirts, rash guards, gis, whatever you want, he's got it. Great designs, good quality, great customer service. EpicRollBJJ.com is the website. The promo code is Chewjitsu20, CHEWJITSU20 for 20% off the order on whatever you buy there. If you want to get on our Patreon for the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up, you'll get access to all the perks that come with it. You can get the details at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, but it's very inexpensive. It supports the podcast, and you get a lot for your money that you're buying into, and including warm-up routines and a bunch of other stuff. So check out at patreon.com, the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, if you would like to get my daily email, then you can do so by going to my website at jujitsu.net/join. When you join up, I'll give you a couple of free ebooks that go into some ideas on training, game planning, things like that. The things that I think could be really useful to your jiu-jitsu. And then I will send you a daily email that will go through everything from jiu-jitsu training tips, diet, lifting, whatever it is I want to share, to philosophical ideas, books, all sorts of stuff. But remember, let me share this with you. It is a daily email that I will send you. It takes you like 2 to 5 minutes to read. It's very short. But it is a daily email that I will send Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekends, but usually just Monday through Friday. But the reason why I say that is I got a gentleman the other day who's, basically very upset that I was sending him spam.
Ew.
And everywhere on my stuff, it says, hey, this is a daily email. Daily.
But it's not spam. It's actually
Well,
stuff that you said you're going to send them.
Right. No, and I know, but it's, you know, again, you signed up. I didn't like, just like if you guys are listening to this podcast, if you get upset about anything that's going on, I didn't ask you to be here. This is free. This is a free podcast, right? Like, so if you don't like it, just, you can go somewhere else. There's free podcasts everywhere. And so like, if you read my email, if you're upset, there is a button that says unsubscribe and it will take you off there. You know, and I put this gentleman, I put him on a blocked list so that he can never, like, he can't subscribe to anything, he can't buy anything from me. I was like, I don't want you around. Just get on somewhere, go somewhere else.
Go on with
bothers someone else. I don't want to deal with him. Too busy.
Maybe he's like a complainer, just likes to complain.
Well, no, 100%. There's a complainer, and I don't want to deal with complainers.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like, if you have I do get criticism sometimes and like constructive stuff. And that stuff actually, like, if you actually have, like, sometimes I've had people say, hey, like for one of my instructionals one time, someone said, hey man, this angle is really hard. I'm like, okay, that's good. I need that because that helps me sharpen things up. Right. So then I keep that in mind whenever I make something else. You know, but again, there's a lot of people that just, you know, they're just upset, you know, and again, it's just one of those things where, you know, people complain. I understand you're having a bad day, whatever, but you know, you can always unsubscribe and you can be gone, and that's it. So that's that. So again, if you join, it's jujitsu.net/join. Join on up if you want my daily email and want some free gifts, and you can get that all there at my website, jujitsu.net. So guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it, got a few ideas to chew on, whether it was the idea of losing like a champion. You know, maybe it gives you some reassurance sometime if you ever have a competition and you're not quite 100% healthy, that it's pretty much the norm for most of us. Or any other ideas shared with you, maybe stick with you. I hope so. And we'll talk to you next week.